Here's that breaking news one more time. Disney has just announced that Jimmy Kimmel will return to television tomorrow, saying in a statement last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It is a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy. And after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday. Joining us now, Puck senior correspondent Dylan Byers. Is this a surprise, Dylan?
It's not a surprise that he was going to come back. I think that was what Disney had been telegraphing from the beginning. I mean, in many ways, the only person who might have called an end to that, I think, was Jimmy Kimmel himself, if he recognized an opportunity here to walk. Look, there's a lot to unpack here. On the one hand, Disney is still caught, I think, between a rock and a hard place when it comes to, their intention to sort of do the right thing here, frankly, and also satisfy the creative community, satisfy Hollywood. But I don't necessarily foresee pressure from the Trump administration or the FCC going away. So how they navigate that, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch what sort of agreement they came to with Kimmel in terms of what he's going to say on air when he comes back on the show tomorrow night. Because, of course, sort of the original catalyst here for Disney suspending his show, at least in their words, is that they sort of wanted to ratchet down, take down the temperature, cool things off, because, as they say in that statement, it was a very emotionally sensitive moment in the country. Now, Jimmy had some things that he wanted to say. Disney clearly had some things they did not want him to say. Where did they net out here? And what is he going to say in that opening monologue that is going to simultaneously, I think, appease Disney while also making the sort of statement that a guy like Jimmy Kimmel wants to make about this issue?
So Brendan Carr, by the way, was at a forum earlier today in New York City. He defended the Jimmy Kimmel comments. He said Jimmy is in the situation that he's in because of his ratings, not because of anything that's happened at the federal government level. Obviously, that doesn't line up with the sequence of events. The New York Times had a great timeline on how this whole thing unfolded. Jimmy Kimmel made the statements on Monday night. Not much of a reaction to them. Neither was there much of a reaction Tuesday morning. It wasn't until a few accounts that, have the job of clipping late night shows, looking for what they see as liberal bias, clipping them, and then that stuff being amplified by a certain set of highly followed people like Elon Musk. That's when a car got involved, and that's when Sinclair made their decision. And after that is when ABC made its decision. So obviously the pressure is clear on the one side for Bob Iger from the government. What about the pressure on the other side? Who was he hearing from? How loud was it? How big was the demand for him to resolve the Kimmel issue with Kimmel coming back on air?
Well, look, obviously the blowback was intense. And I think if the intention was to dial down the energy, I think anyone who's lived in this country for the last few days know that really didn't happen. And there was, a sort of statement signed on by many of the biggest stars in Hollywood. That statement, frankly, was sort of weak. They didn't necessarily threaten any action or said they were going to stop working with Disney. But look, if you're Bob Iger and if you're Disney, you pride yourself on the integrity of your company and on your relationship with that creative community. And I think the blowback was only going to snowball from there, right? And do you see, potentially canceled Disney Plus subscriptions in a material way? Do you see big creators not actually deciding or making a statement that they are not going to work with Disney? I mean, potentially. Back to your point about late night, though, Katie, like all things can be true here. It's definitely true that late night television is not a great business. You're not going to book any media executive on your show who's going to come forward and say, oh, no, there's a bright future for late night. I mean, we are looking at in Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, and Stephen Colbert, whose show, of course, is also not coming back. We're looking at sort of the last generation of marquee late night hosts who are sort of household names in this country, or at least in parts of this country. That business is going away. But none of that negates the timeline that you brought up, which is that this happened because of FCC pressure, because of pressure from Nexstar and Sinclair, which clearly got the message about what Brendan Carr was saying and what it was that he wanted. And then because Disney, which is really stuck in this hard place, a lot of business leaders are trying to figure out how to navigate an administration that is brazenly transactional. Disney made the choice that it did. Now, can this become water under the bridge, right? Can you bring back Jimmy Kimmel and can you patch everything up? Maybe you're still going to have that pressure from the Trump administration, and we're going to see what he says on Tuesday night.
Well, so I'm interested in that angle of it, because I wonder if Bob Iger or other media executives have looked at the landscape and looked at just the unfolding events in the last few days and seen that capitulation or trying to get in good with the administration, it doesn't necessarily get them the ends that they're looking for. I mean, Donald Trump is still going after John Karl aggressively in the Oval Office or on the White House lawn, calling him a bad person, calling him a bad journalist, saying that he should get fired. I mean, it's not as if the pressure on media organizations or news organizations that are contained within these companies has lessened over the past few days.
No, that's absolutely right. And I'm going to borrow a line that I read somewhere. I'm sorry, you'll have to forgive me. I've been reading and listening to a lot about this, so apologies to the author because I forget where this came from. But if a bully comes for your lunch money and you give him your lunch money, that bully is not going to just go away and not come back the next day asking for more. That's not how that works. And if you look back and you say, okay, what was the first moment in Trump 2.0 when we saw a Hollywood executive or an entertainment executive show signs of capitulation to this administration? And it was Bob Iger. It was that $15 million settlement over the George Stephanopoulos lawsuit from Trump, plus $1 million for legal fees, that sort of set a standard for what the street price was for settling lawsuits that Trump brought against broadcast networks and against entertainment companies. Does anyone looking at the Kimmel situation right now and the pressure from Carr think that he got the monkey off of his back? Obviously, he did not.
No, I think I read that too. I want to say a version of it was Brian Stelter, but I think he was quoting somebody else. And I think there was an F-bomb contained in it that we can't say. We can say on It's Cable, but we're not going to out of, respect for the audience, clearly. Let's bring in a writer for Status, our friend Oliver Darcy, to this conversation. So, Oliver, I know you've been listening in. What else do you want to add?
I mean, I think this is a result of a lot of the backlash that Disney has faced. I don't know if they anticipated this much backlash, but they're obviously getting tremendous pressure from their customers, who are some of them canceling Disney Plus, and particularly from the Hollywood community. And so I think they were really left with no choice. I think at the end, Disney was probably working with Kimmel to desperately get him back on air as soon as possible, given the immense amount of scrutiny that they faced. And I'm not surprised that this happened, but I'm very curious, too, to see whether some of these local stations continue or take the program tomorrow night. We had seen the right-wing station owner Sinclair say that they wanted Jimmy Kimmel to apologize to Charlie Kirk's family and to also donate to Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA. I can't imagine that Jimmy Kimmel will do that, but how does Nexstar react if he doesn't? I think that's an open question we're going to figure out. I imagine Disney probably worked it out with them behind the scenes, but I'll be curious how they respond.
Yeah, that is a good point, Dylan. Before ABC made its decision, Sinclair, Nexstar took the show off the air. Is Disney speaking for them as well? Would they have coordinated this behind the scenes before they put him back on air?
Look, I don't know, and obviously this statement just came out recently, but what I would say is that if you are Bob Iger and Dana Walden at Disney, you are probably trying to think a few chess moves ahead. And you don't want to put yourself in a position now where you're going to war against the broadcasters, against Sinclair and, against Sinclair and Nexstar, right? That's not a good look either. What you were trying to do here is put out every fire across the board, and that means getting Sinclair and getting Nexstar on board before you put out an announcement like this, which my assumption is that that's where they netted out, but I can't be sure.
Do we know any of the numbers on how many folks were threatening Oliver to unsubscribe from Hulu? I mean, I know there's news articles about it, but what if there are any hard numbers? Would we ever see them?
We never see them. But I mean, you know, Howard Stern went on the air today and said he canceled his Disney Plus subscription as a result of this. And I've seen, obviously, a number of people post screenshots online saying they're canceling. So do we know how many? Is it a significant amount to Disney's bottom line? Probably not. But, you know, when you have someone like Howard Stern saying, you know, I'm canceling in support of Jimmy Kimmel, that's a problem for Disney. And I think, you know, usually the way these stories work is if you can see a little bit of the backlash in public facing view, it's usually like 1,000 times worse behind the scenes. So I imagine Disney's been getting a lot of scrutiny from creatives saying, we want Jimmy Kimmel back on the air, and we don't want to do business with a company that throws someone under the bus for the Trump administration. It's a big problem for them, and so that's why you've seen them rush to get this deal done, I think. And I was thinking they wanted to get it done as soon as possible because this was creating a lot of problems behind the scenes.